Hi, Year 12. This is Mr. Azapadi with another lesson on Buddhist meditation. This one is on Zen meditation. So what you're going to do is, it'd be good if you can print the slides out and just make notes on the slides, annotate them as we go through. I won't print out, I won't send you all the slides from the video because some of it you don't need to anything on. It's just kind of background stuff that you don't need to know. You don't need to write anything down about. What to say then? So yeah, we learned about samatha and vipassana meditation, which are the kind of you find in a lot of different forms of Buddhism, but they're linked mainly to Theravada, because in Theravada those are the everything about meditation really. You just need to know those two. In Mahayana Buddhism, you often get, sometimes you do get samatha and vipassana, sometimes you don't, but you also get lots of other different forms of meditation, and we're going to look at what those are. And well, we're not going to look at all of them actually, but we're definitely going to look at Zen, because Zen has a very different idea about what meditation is about and why we meditate. So yeah, that's what we're going to look at in this lesson. A couple of things you might want to write down. First of all, is that Zen is a form of Buddhism primarily found in Japan now, although it has its origins in China, where it has a different name. It's called Chan Buddhism, but it's called Zen in Japan. And it is a Mahayana form of Buddhism. So it's a kind of, we've talked before about how Mahayana is a umbrella term. There's lots of different kinds of Mahayana Buddhism, and this is one. In Japan, it is not the most popular form of Buddhism. That is, Pure Land is more popular in terms of how many people follow it, but it is certainly more well known outside of Japan than any other form of Japanese Buddhism. So Zen, when we talk about the influence of Buddhism in the Western world, Zen has had a particularly big influence, particularly on in America. Zen became quite a big movement, and still is today. Zen Buddhism is still quite widely followed today by Buddhists in the West. Why is it so popular? Well, I think it's because it's there's quite a lot of deep philosophy in it. It's also got quite a strong link to the arts and kind of expressive arts, painting and poetry and things, which is makes it appeal to a lot of people. So yeah, not the most popular form of Buddhism in Japan, but certainly the most popular form of Japanese Buddhism outside of Japan, I would say. With the possible exception of Soka Gakkai, the people who chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, but they're often seen as quite different from other forms of Buddhism. Okay, so first thing you might want to do is stop this video and watch the video link that that's on the screen now. Now I'll put that link below the video when I put it onto YouTube, so you'll be able to click on it. It's just a quick video that gives you a bit of documentary kind of thing, just about 3 minutes, showing you what life is like in a Zen temple. It gives you a bit of a feel for the kind of aesthetics of the religion, the look and the feel of the religion, because Zen has a pretty unique kind of set of what's the word? A kind of feel, I suppose it would be, an aesthetic, a way of looking, or a kind of way of expressing itself that makes it quite different to other forms of religion. And with that in mind, once you've watched that, we'll just go through another few things that are kind of Zen is famously linked to in Japanese culture. Look here, this is a Zen garden. These are kinds of garden that you often find it under temples or just in Japan generally, and they are linked with Zen. You get lots of stones, lots of rocks, not that many plants, and the stones are raked into these patterns. They're usually supposed to have some kind of symbolic significance. Tea. In Japan, tea is sometimes served in what's called the tea ceremony, in a very formal and symbolic way with lots of bowing and so on. That is linked to Zen. Artwork. So Zen is very much associated with art, especially art involving nature, because nature is very important to Zen. This is a painting painted in like I think it was in a minute, like a very quick painting. Capturing the moment is important in Zen art. Haiku is another thing that's often practiced within Zen. Writing these poems, haiku poems are very short, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. They're supposed to capture a particular moment in nature or time. Martial arts, interesting one. So martial arts, this is more in China than Japan, but it has that link in Japan as well, that the martial arts are often said to have evolved within Zen monasteries. And I've seen some dispute about this, whether it really is true that it comes from Zen monasteries, martial arts, but certainly in the public image, there's an idea that Zen and martial arts are linked. And that's shown in like the films like Enter the 36th Chamber of Shaolin. Shaolin is a Zen temple, or Chan temple in the Chinese name, in China. And you get nowadays monks from the Shaolin temple like tour the world, showing their kind of abilities in martial arts. That's a great film, by the way, The 36th Chamber of Shaolin, if you want to watch a Kung Fu movie. I think it used to be, at least it used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it is anymore. But it's very good to watch if you get a chance. It also gave the name to this, the Wu-Tang Clan's first album, Enter the Wu-Tang, the 36 Chambers. Shows how kind of some Buddhist things have seeped their way into popular culture. Calligraphy. In Japan, and particularly in Zen Buddhism, you have this art of calligraphy with these really thick brushes and these really thick lines that they use. So those Zen and art, not really stuff you need to know for the exam, but interesting stuff as back. So what is Zen? Zen is a Japanese. The word Zen is a Japanese translation of a Chinese translation of the word jhana. So the word jhana or dhyana, which we looked at in the previous lesson, it's the states of intense meditative concentration or focus that people develop in samatha meditation. That word was translated into Chinese as Chan, and then it was translated into Japanese as Zen. So that seems to indicate that meditation is very important to Zen, and it is. In many forms of Zen, meditation is very, very important. However, it's interesting that Zen does not really emphasize the importance of the jhanas. It doesn't really emphasize samatha meditation and developing in concentration. It emphasizes instead it emphasizes meditation for different reasons. So it might be that what's happened is that word jhana just was seen as just a word linked to meditation. In other words, it's another kind of word for meditation. And that's why it got translated over into Zen and kind of changed its meaning. But it's interesting that, even though it's called jhana Buddhism, really, it doesn't really have much interest in jhanas or developing concentration in that way. Now, to understand Zen, you have to understand the teaching of the Tathagata. The Tathagata is a word that's translated as Buddha nature. Tathagata is a word for the Buddha. In fact, in the Pali Canon, it's probably used more often than the word Buddha. Tathagata means one who has gone like this, one who has gone thus. Strange word, I know, but when they say gone, they probably mean gone out from samsara, who's kind of left the world of suffering behind. So he's gone out from some samsara. Garbha means a womb or an embryo. So the best way to think about it is that the embryo of the Buddha, and it's translated as Buddha nature into English. So it's the idea that we all have the embryo of a Buddha within us. In other words, we can all grow into a Buddha. This teaching is found in a number of Mahayana sutras, which are written from the 3rd century CE. The teaching is that every living being has within them the Tathagata or Buddha nature. This is the pure mind of an enlightened person, which is permanent, unchanging, and free from greed, hatred, and delusion. The Buddha nature can be experienced, but cannot be expressed in words. So that's a key thing in Zen Buddhism. They have this idea that, yes, instead of just seeing us as kind of not enlightened and needing to get to enlightenment, they see us as already being enlightened deep down within. Now, this teaching is controversial, and some Buddhists think it goes against the teachings of the Buddha. Why might this be? Well, you need to add some notes on here. So the reason is because look at how it's described. It says that we have within us the Buddha nature, which is permanent, unchanging. Well, that goes against anatta and anicca, the idea that there's no fixed part of ourselves. Suddenly it seems like there is a fixed part, that underneath our changing exterior there is this permanent part of us within, that is our Buddha nature. Now, some people have even said, well, look, this doesn't sound like Buddhism, this sounds like Brahmanism. Brahmanism is the teaching that says that there is something, that there is a part of ourselves that's unchanging, and that we need to get back in touch with that unchanging part of ourselves, the Atman. But the Buddha rejected that. That's what anatta is, rejecting the teaching of Atman. So some people have said this goes completely against what the Buddha taught, but it is part there in the Mahayana Sutras, and it is very key to what Zen believes. Now, to understand Zen, you need to understand the story I'm going to tell. So remember, Zen comes from Chan Buddhism, and that's you can see that at the top of the slide. It says the fifth Chan patriarch. Now, Chan, yeah, that's the name of Zen in Japan. A patriarch is a leader of the religion. So, means a patriarch means a male leader, and not in those days it was all male leaders. Probably still is in Zen religion. So you'd have these patriarchs. A patriarch was the leader of the religion, and in Zen, as we'll see in year 13, because we're going to study Zen in much more detail in year 13. But in Zen, you had the idea that the leadership was passed down from one patriarch to another. There'd be a leader, and then when he died, he passes it on to the next leader, and so on and so on, in this direct line from the Buddha to now. Now, the fifth Chan patriarch in China, so that's the fifth head of Chan Buddhism in China, was called Hung Jian. According to a famous Zen story, he decided that the monk who could write the best poem describing the truth of Buddhism would become the next patriarch. So he was deciding who would become the leader after he died. Now, I should say before we begin, this story is vital to understanding what Zen thinks about enlightenment. And without understanding what Zen thinks about enlightenment, we can't really understand what it thinks about meditation. So he said, whoever writes the best poem can be the next patriarch. The first poem was written on the wall of the monastery by the most senior disciple, who most people expected to be the next patriarch. It said, the body is a Bodhi tree. That's the tree which the Buddha was enlightened under. The mind a standing mirror bright. At all times polish it diligently, let no dust alight. Obviously that's a translation, but that's the basic idea of what he wrote. Now what's he saying? Well, he's saying that our mind is a bright mirror, and we need to polish it all the time, and to let no dust go on it. So in other words, we've got this Buddha nature within ourselves. We need to constantly meditate and practice Buddhism in order to stop the Buddha nature getting covered by greed, hatred, and ignorance, so that we can get enlightened. That was the first poem. However, a lowly monk named Huineng read the first poem and thought it was wrong, and wrote his own poem next to it. He said, Bodhi originally has no tree, the mirror has no stand. Buddha nature is always clean and pure. Where is there room for dust to alight? When you alight, it means to land on something or stand on something or whatever. Now, what does he mean? Well, what he's trying to say here is that it's the bit at the end that's most important. Buddha nature is always clean and pure. Where is there room for dust to alight? So in other words, he's saying, hold on, but the teaching of Buddha nature is that, we have a part of ourselves that is completely pure, free from greed, hatred, and delusion, already enlightened. Well, if that's true, then how can dust get on it? How can it become not pure if it's always clean and pure? How can what's the word? Why do we need to dust and to practice Buddhism to make sure we're enlightened when we're already enlightened deep down? Now, the important thing is that the claim from Huineng's followers is that the fifth patriarch thought that this second poem was the best. Actually, in actual fact, history shows that two rival schools were set up. The senior disciple set up his school, and Huineng set up his school. However, in the end, the school that followed Huineng became the dominant school, and the other school died out. So now all Chan and Zen Buddhism trace themselves back to this school. So Huineng becomes really important. Everybody agrees in Zen now with Huineng and what he wrote. What he wrote is important because he taught it. From that comes the teaching in Zen of sudden enlightenment. Zen believes that we are already inherently enlightened. That's because we have that Buddha nature within. We already have enlightenment within ourselves. Therefore, we do not actually need to do anything to reach nirvana. We just need to realize what is already there. That is the idea of sudden enlightenment. Enlightenment isn't a process of going from not being enlightened to being enlightened. It's the process of realizing that we are enlightened already. Now that's a confusing thing, right? Because all religions are based on a goal. Right? You want to get to a goal, whether it's to heaven or to good rebirth or nirvana, and then you do things to reach that goal. But the weird thing about Zen is the teaching of sudden enlightenment means that, well, we are already enlightened. So what is the point in doing stuff like meditation? And all that background is so important to understanding what Zen Buddhists believe. So here's the thing. If we are already enlightened, what is the point of meditation? The two main schools of Zen developed different solutions to this problem. These schools began in China, but are now better known by their Japanese names, Rinzai Zen and Soto Zen. Rinzai and Soto Zen. So we're going to see that both of these have quite different solutions to the problem of sudden enlightenment, or the fact that we're already enlightened, and what do you do then? And that means they've got different approaches to meditation. Rinzai Zen emphasizes the use of what are called koans. That's a Japanese term, a koan. The idea is they shock people into realizing their Buddha nature. Koans are riddles that cannot be solved or questions that make no sense. So an example is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Now the idea is that you try to think about that question. Now obviously the point is that it has no answer. What is the sound of one hand clapping? It's kind of like nonsense, really. But the idea is that you try and think of an answer. So they used to break down our tendency to use rational thought to find the truth. This is said to lead to great doubt, a period of uncertainty where nothing seems to make sense anymore. So if you just go to a Rinzai Zen temple and people look like they're meditating, they're probably not meditating in the way that we think of it, which is calming their mind and developing insight in that way. They are thinking about their koan, they're pondering it in their mind. And the idea is that it's actually supposed to make no sense. In fact, it's supposed to get you to the point where nothing needs to make sense anymore. You just feel complete doubt about everything. This in turn is supposed to lead to what they call a great death. Not actually death, but death in your mind, in which all conceptual and theoretical thought disappears and the student gains a direct insight into Buddha nature. Now this is an interesting idea, and it's actually something you find in a lot of religions, that in a way confusion is an advantage to you in understanding the truth, because we saw before, Buddha nature can't be explained in words, can't be summed up in any words. So you can't explain to someone what Buddha nature is like. What that person has to do is to let go of words. And the way they let go of words is by, trying to solve these problems which words can't help you with. What is the sign of one hand clapping? Because it doesn't make any sense logically, words can't help you with it. And so after a while, you think about it until your whole sense of what can be expressed in words breaks down. And then suddenly you feel that you experience this moment they call a great death, when you stop thinking in terms of words and you just experience Buddha nature directly. This direct insight is called satori, a sudden and immediate understanding of the truth which cannot be put into words. So that's what you're aiming for in Rinzai Zen. You're not aiming to for a gradual process where you calm and gradually develop the mind and develop insight. You're aiming for almost like a bit of a point of crisis where you don't know what's going on, then suddenly you gain that insight, and that's satori. Now, meditation is not absent from Rinzai Zen, but the idea of gradually developing calm, concentration and wisdom is absent. Rinzai practitioners are more likely to spend meditation time thinking about their koan in order to bring about the sudden experience of satori. So that is, if they do, you could either say they don't meditate in the normal way, or you could say if they do, then they meditate in a particular way. They meditate in a very different way to most people. In Soto Zen, on the other hand, meditation is extremely important. Meditation in this tradition is called Zazen. It involves long periods of seated meditation, and the techniques involved can seem on the surface to be similar to traditional samatha and vipassana techniques. Sorry, there's a misspelling of vipassana. That first A should not be there. However, the thinking behind Zazen is very different. The point of Zazen is not to calm and concentrate the mind and then develop insight. This would suggest that we're not already enlightened, and as we've seen, Zen thinks we're already enlightened deep down. Zazen is not about trying to reach enlightenment, but about manifesting our inherent enlightenment, manifesting the fact that we're already enlightened. Soto Zen teaches that we are already enlightened, but we need to manifest this enlightenment. We need to make it clear. This means Zazen is not about cultivating a different mind, but about revealing what is already there. The Zen master Dogen famously said, practice and enlightenment are not two. What did he mean? Well, by practice he means meditation. So he's saying meditation and enlightenment are not two. That means they are not different things. What he means is he disagrees with the normal Buddhist view, which is that meditation is something that you do to get to enlightenment. That would make them different things. If that was true, they would be two. There would be meditation to get there, and there'd be enlightenment where you're going. But what he thinks is that actually, when you meditate, it's at that moment you are enlightened. You manifest the fact that within you there's already enlightenment. So look at Zen Buddhism, and Rinzai and Soto Zen take very different approaches to what it means to think about sudden enlightenment. For Rinzai Zen, sudden enlightenment means that you can't move to enlightenment slowly. You have to get there in one sudden movement of suddenly realizing that you were already enlightened in the first place. So it's a bit more harsh and shocking and, jarring in some ways, the experience. You suddenly are shocked into enlightenment. In Soto Zen, the interesting thing with Soto Zen would say even that approach is too gradual, because they're still saying that you need to change something about yourself to get to enlightenment. You need to suddenly have this awakening. Soto Zen says, no, you don't need to have any kind of moment. You just need to sit down and meditate. As soon as you sit down and meditate, you're enlightened. You are a Buddha. You're letting what is inside shine through the practice of meditation. So it's hard to get your head around in a way, but that's what Zen says about enlightenment and meditation. Okay, here's a task I want you to do on some paper. I want you to put this title: Meditation is the most important Buddhist practice. Discuss. That would be an essay title. Then I would like you to do this. Put this table. Is the most important, is not the most important. I suppose you could just put agree and disagree if you want. It's up to you. And then I want you to do this. When you've got that table in, I want you to think, what would these different people think about this? Theravada Buddhists, I'm talking about Theravada Buddhists who follow Samatha and Vipassana. What would they say? Is it the most important? Is it not the most important? And tell me why. You might be able to give arguments on both sides for Theravada. Don't worry if you can't do it right now. I'd just like to have a go. Soto Zen, would they say it's the most important or not the most important, and why? Rinzai Zen, what would they think and why? What do you think Kamatic Buddhists would say and why? What do you think Pure Land Buddhists would say and why? And what would Soka Gakkai International Buddhists say and why? So I'd like to have a go at this. This is a bit of independent thought on this. What would people say and why? I don't want SEEs or anything like that. Oh, sorry, not SEEs, perils or anything like that. I just want the name on one side or the other, and then a justification, like a sentence or so, to say why have you put them on one side? Why have you put them on the other side? Why would this kind of Buddhist say it is the most important thing? Why might they say it isn't the most important thing? If you think it's not the most important thing, perhaps you could tell me what they think is the most important thing and why they prefer that thing. Or maybe they think that, maybe you could find arguments why some people think that it's not the most important thing, but they think it's one of the most important things. Well, that's still, I say, well, I suppose you can put that on either side, to be honest. But you might want to say that they think it's an important thing, but there are other equally important things. Okay. I'm just going to go through a little bit more material about Pure Land that might help you with this task, and then I'll put the task back on, and that'll be the end of the video. So I just want to say something about Pure Land Buddhism, because you might think, and I think you'd be right to think, that Pure Land Buddhism does not place any emphasis on meditation. Pure Land Buddhists think we're living in the time of Mappo. That means a time of decline in the world, where the world is too full of evil and hatred and greed and delusion for people to make any real spiritual progress, and therefore meditation doesn't make any sense. All you need to do is to chant the name of Amida, and then you can get reborn as Pure Land. It's like an easier path, because we can't take the more difficult path now. However, there are people who have a different interpretation of Pure Land, so let's have a look at the next slide. Do Pure Land Buddhists meditate? Thich Nhat Hanh is a Zen Buddhist teacher from Vietnam. I think we might have watched a video by him last year when we talked about emptiness, but we definitely will see more of him in year 13. He's a very famous figure. A Zen Buddhist teacher from Vietnam whose teachings have become very popular throughout the world, especially in the West. Although he is mostly known as a teacher of mindfulness meditation, he also holds Pure Land Buddhism in high esteem and incorporates some Pure Land practices into his teaching. So he's a fan of Pure Land Buddhism, even though he's not a practicing Pure Land Buddhist or a member of the Pure Land Buddhist organization. He incorporates some of their teachings and practices. He has published a book, Finding Our True Home, which gives a translation of one of the Sukhavati Sutras. The Sukhavati Sutras are the Mahayana Sutras which describe the Pure Land. Sukhavati means happy land, is the Sanskrit name of the Pure Land. And so he's translating one of the scriptures that's the basis of the whole Pure Land religion. And so he gives a translation, but he also interprets the importance of Pure Land teachings. Now, the introduction of his book is not written by him, but it's written by someone called Sister Annabelle Laity, who kind of summarizes his views. So Laity argues that the idea of chanting to be reborn in the Pure Land is only the popular belief of what Pure Land is about. So she says, that's not what Pure Land is mostly about, chanting to be reborn in the Pure Land. By contrast, she argues, the deeper practice is to experience that Amida Buddha is your own nature, and the land of happiness, I should say the land, not he land, is your own heart and mind. For Thich Nhat Hanh, Pure Land practice is reinterpreted. Instead of being about reaching the Pure Land after death, it's about transforming your mind here and now. This is done through mindfulness and realizing our Buddha nature within. Sister Laity sees this approach as superior to simply wanting to be born in the Pure Land. She says, if we do not find the Pure Land in this present life and present moment, we are unlikely to find it in the future. So what she's saying there, what she's really saying is, okay, look, if we want to get to the Pure Land, that's fine, but what's more important is developing ourselves and changing ourselves as a person, becoming more wise, becoming calmer, developing the sort of mind of the sort of person who would live in the Pure Land. So she's kind of saying, look, forget the idea that you can just chant and get reborn in the Pure Land. Try to develop yourself into the state of mind of someone who could be born in the Pure Land, or someone who lives in the Pure Land. If you do that now, that is by doing that, not just by chanting, that you've got a chance of getting to the Pure Land when you die. Now, what's going on here? Well, Pure Land Buddhism is often accused of not being proper Buddhism by other Buddhists, because, Buddhism has traditionally been about self-reliance, meditation, your personal journey to nirvana here and now, whereas Pure Land says none of that's very important, and actually you should just rely on someone else and chant to be reborn in the Pure Land. What we can see Thich Nhat Hanh as doing, and Sister Laity, his follower there, is to reinterpret Pure Land in a way that makes it more acceptable to mainstream Buddhists. To say, actually, although it might appear to be just about praying to get reborn in the Pure Land, it's actually the same as other Buddhism. It's about, like Zen, realizing your Buddha nature. It's about developing your personality and your heart, so that you have the mindset of an enlightened person. Now, so for this one, So for this one, we could actually argue that, in a way, Pure Land Buddhists do meditate. This is what they're trying to say, because if we say that meditation is an activity that involves trying to develop our mind into the direction of enlightenment, then we could say actually that's what they're doing when they practice chanting. It's not just a prayer to say, someone else help me get to nirvana, or help me get to the Pure Land. From this interpretation, chanting is actually a kind of meditation. It's a kind of way of focusing, developing the mind, developing good qualities, so that you've got the kind of qualities that an enlightened person has. However, I put this up because this is a really good point to respond to, because actually I would argue this is a complete reinterpretation of Pure Land and does not match up with what Pure Land Buddhism actually teaches. Because if we go back to what we said about Pure Land Buddhism says we're living in the age of Mappo, and therefore we cannot develop our mind in a more healthy direction here and now. It's impossible to do. So it's not possible to develop your mind in that way. So that's why we have to rely on Amida. If we could get to enlightenment here and now, then there would be no point in having to pray to Amida. There'd be no point in chanting. The chanting only happens because it's not possible to develop our mind. And Pure Land is very clear that it doesn't matter whether you're, how spiritually developed you are. You could be a very evil person. You could have done lots of bad things. If you chant, you'll get into the Pure Land. So it's explicit in Pure Land teachings that chanting is nothing to do with making yourself a better person, improving the state of your heart, developing more compassion or wisdom, or getting rid of the three poisons. The assumption in Pure Land Buddhism is that we are full of greed, hatred, and ignorance, and we can't do anything about it. We just need to pray to Amida, and he will let us be reborn in the Pure Land, and then we can sort it out from there. So I would say this is a brave attempt by Thich Nhat Hanh and Sister Laity to argue that in a way there is meditation within Pure Land Buddhism, but ultimately it's not successful. It's actually not the case. So look, let's just go back to the task. I'll just leave this here as the last thing. It might be that, see, with Pure Land, you now may be able to say, meditation is the most important practice, you might be able to say why Pure Land Buddhists would agree with it and disagree. Because if you'd say it is the most important, you could say, well, if we can't, they think chanting's the most important, but if we believe Thich Nhat Hanh, chanting is a form of meditation. But on the not most important, you could say, but actually Thich Nhat Hanh's wrong. Chanting is not a form of meditation because it's not got any of the same qualities of meditation. It's not aiming to do the same thing as meditation. So see what you can do, and we will do a bit of feedback. I'm not sure in the next lesson, we might move on to something else first, but we'll definitely come back to this question in the future. It would be useful if you could send me your little tables that you drew up with those different ideas on. Even if you're not really sure, just put down what you think and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you very much.